Hey everybody, welcome into another edition of Make Every Second Count Live with me, your host and international award-winning Make Every Second Count speaker, Jeff Marconette Jr. So pumped up to say that each and every time I say it. But I want you guys to do me a favor tonight. I want you guys to each show up with your questions ready and your notepads out, get pens because you're going to be able to take massive amounts of notes tonight because tonight's guest is amazing. So, I ask you guys, first of all, if you would please share this episode out. Invite all kinds of people to watch it. Don't forget to give us thumbs up, hearts, frowny faces, cry faces. You can even get mad at us. I don't mind. And then don't forget to keep the comments coming because we want to have more of a conversation than just make a presentation. But with no further ado, I would like to bring to the stage the man, the myth, the legend, Cam himself.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I am really happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, I'm so happy you are here. I'm so honored that you were able to take the time out of your busy schedule to be here with me and my viewers. And I'm looking forward to learning tonight as well.
Yeah, this is a great topic and people have really enjoyed it. So I think you and your listeners are going to have a good time.
Yes. So if you would like to go through a short introduction, tell everybody who you are, where you're from, and what you do. And then I'm going to be inviting a few people on my phone. So I'm looking down, but I am paying attention too.
All right, that sounds good.
Thank you.
So my name is Cam Knight. I am a mentor, international speaker, and author of a dozen books that you see behind me in the area of mental, physical, and emotional performance. And as far back as I can remember, I've been a very driven individual. And although I had my fair share of success, I felt like it was much harder than it needed to be. And I wondered why that was. And I realized there's a part of our brain that holds us back. And I call this part resistance. So this is a topic that I kind of talk about a lot more now.
That is awesome. So all right, so I at 17 I was involved in a serious car accident.
Yeah,
I
sorry to
spent
hear.
I spent 2.5 months in a coma, three and a half in the hospital, and they didn't expect me to be walking now, but I am. And I am out to show everybody that people everywhere go through the same things over and over and over again. But I believe that's because they just go through these things.
Yeah.
But I believe if they grew through these things, they wouldn't keep going through these things. So I have set out on a mission to help people make every second count. And that is all about growth and helping people grow through what they're going through. So, has there been anything in your life that you have had to grow through, Cam?
Oof. No, I can't say I have, Jeff. I'm just kidding. I have had plenty of stuff in my life from as far back as childhood. Interestingly enough, I don't really talk about this too much, and this might be the first time I'm sharing online.
Well, thank
But
you. I feel honored.
yeah, but your story triggered a memory of this. When I was a kid, probably 5 or 6 years old, I actually got hit by a motorcycle and I landed head first and I was out. I don't even remember the incident. All I remember is waking up next to my mom, and my mom was all worried. And I had bandages wrapped around my head like I was coming out of a war zone. And so I can really appreciate and resonate with the challenges that accidents do create. And this thing really did have a big effect in my development. But this was just one of the challenges. I had another challenge of processed food, which is like in many ways a hard drug to me. So imagine giving a child a hard drug day in and day out, week after week, month after month for years and years. By the time I was an adult, I was really intense and, let's just say, out of my mind in a lot of ways. And so those are some of the challenges I've worked through. And I do like what you said about the perseverance and the growth because here I am. It took a lot of work to get to this point,
Yeah.
but I can stand here before you talking intelligently and in a very coherent way, which is something that I really lacked when I was younger.
Yeah, well, great job, man. I'm certainly proud of the person you have become in the years since being young. And let's face it, you're still young.
I'm
You're
still
just
young.
not as young as you
Uh,
were at that previous age.
yeah, yeah,
So, I know what we're going to be talking about tonight is why you're stuck, even if you want to grow.
yeah.
And I think that is important in life because a lot of people want to grow, but they feel stuck and they don't understand why they're stuck. But you have an interesting take on that. Am I
Yeah.
right?
I do. And I call this concept resistance. And I'll talk a little bit about how I got into it and what resistance is, and then we'll go from there. So, growing up, my parents had a lot of expectations of me, and unfortunately, not a lot of support. And I also, in many ways, grew up watching television. And in many ways, my brain came to the conclusion that my self worth and who I was as a person was really dependent on the house I lived in, the car I had, the money in my bank account, and so forth. So from the get go, I had a lot of drives, and some of them were very almost like I needed to have achieved these things for to get people to like and respect me. And unfortunately, I didn't really make the mark. You know, when I was in high school, I wanted to do much better than I really did. And I wanted to get into an Ivy League school, which I didn't. In fact, when I got into college, I used what's called the backdoor method, where you apply to a easy to get into major. And then once you get into the college, you can transfer into a more difficult one. And that's what I did. And once I graduated, I wanted to work for one of the more prestigious firms. And although I ended up getting a good job at a good company, it wasn't what I started off with. And in many ways, this was a pattern. I had these high goals or these desires. And although I would eventually reach them or I would reach something close to it, I often missed the mark. And I wondered why that was. Why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation to do it, but for one reason or another, I can or don't do it. Now, at the time, there were no clear answers. The best answers I heard related to you need to have better beliefs or you need motivation and discipline. And those are all pieces of the puzzle, but I felt like there was a lot more to it. And that question lingered in my mind for the last 15 to 20 years. Every time I felt stuck, I wondered why. Why can't I get stuff done? Why do I keep spinning my wheels? Why don't I just do this dang thing so I can get the result that I want?
Yeah.
And the more books I read, coaching I did, and seminars I attended, the more I learned about the complexities of the brain. And over time, the running theme that I kept hearing was this will get in your way. This is what can stop you, and this is can create hurdles. And over time, my mind began to come to the conclusion that, hey, wait a minute, there's a part of our brain designed to hold us back. There's a part of our mind built to keep us from growing and making progress. And I call this part resistance, and it's this brick wall that we hit anytime that we want to do something, but we can't. And so I can dive a little bit more into how this process works because it can give a lot of clarity. But I don't want to keep talking and give you the opportunity to ask
No,
any questions.
no, you are completely fine. But I'm curious, what part of the brain is that? Do you know?
Yeah, so it really helps to understand that the part of the brain that creates wants and desires works separately and independent of the part that allows us to act on the desire. So this is really important. The part of the brain that creates wants works separately from the part that allows us to act on that want. So we have one part of the brain that's creating wants, and it's creating essentially endless wants one after another. It doesn't check to see if we have the time or energy to do or achieve the want. It simply creates wants. And because its only job is to create wants, it's more or less just creating wants all the time.
Mhm.
And then we have another part of the brain that actually checks to see if that want is safe or worth doing. And this is the part that gives us the green light to act on that want. And so, what's really important to understand is that we can have one brain both create a desire for something and at the same time keep us from going after it. And I remember when I was struggling, I used to think whoever created humanity or this reality must have been really sick and twisted because how could they do this to us? How could they create this strong wants and desires, but then keep us from going after it? But when you look at it from this perspective, it makes much more sense because the two parts are separate. So it's possible for us to want something and not be able to go after it. Now, you asked a question, so what part of the brain? So the brain is really complex. So there isn't just one specific area where this is playing out, but it is mainly coming down to two main parts of the brain. One is the prefrontal cortex, and the other is the limbic system, and more specifically, a part of the limbic system that is responsible for our motivations and drives. So, this part kind of creates the drives, and then the prefrontal cortex, it's kind of like our control center. It kind of decides, it's our impulse control. So, we might see a cupcake, and the limbic system will want us to go after it.
Ooh,
And the no, yeah, the prefrontal cortex will say something like, "But you're on a diet," or "This is too much sweet." And when there's an imbalance, it can create challenges. In fact, what I say is both parts of the brain can get or can create challenges into doing something. And that's because our own wants can be a hindrance in achieving them. And there's many challenges that the wanting mechanism creates. And I'll just talk quickly about one of them that I know a lot of people are experiencing. And this is what I call an overactive want. An overactive want is a want where a brain is constantly creating wants and desires. It sees something and it wants it. It hears about something and it wants that too. Oftentimes, it doesn't have to hear or see anything. It's just pulling us in all these directions. And before we can start on one thing, this mechanism, the wanting mechanism, is pulling us in other places to go. And as long as we're going from one want to another, we're not making progress in any. And so this is where some of our hindrance can arise. But then when we look at resistance, anytime we want to do something, it gets evaluated by resistance using a whole host of criteria. And if the decision or desire is not in line in any of the criteria, this part of the brain, resistance will prevent action. And so the way to think about this part is to think of standing before a panel of judges or board of directors. Every decision that comes up must go through them. And even one of the if even if one of the members is against the idea, it won't pass. So this is how kind of the two parts work. And this is why a person can be stuck doing something that they want, even if they have the motivation and desire to do it.
all right. Well, okay. So let's say that somebody wants to go out there and accomplish something like climbing a mountain. Now, I know that your brain will try and talk you out of that, and it will tell you that it's too dangerous and all this stuff about it being not very safe and a whole bunch of things. But how can you use that stuff as fuel to actually go for it?
Yeah, so this is a very good question. So when we have a desire, like I said, the desire gets filtered through the brain using a whole host of criterias. And one of the criterias could be lack of information. So if we want to do something that we don't have a lot of information about, how to do it, or if it's safe or whatever, the brain is going to prevent action. And it's going to throw up thoughts in our heads like it's too difficult and that it is going to be too dangerous. And as long as we pay attention to those thoughts, we're going to fall in line with what resistance wants and it wins. And so, what's really important to understand is that the voice of your desires and the voice of your resistance, they're both your voices. And when
Yeah.
they come up in your head, they seem like you're the one thinking them. So when you're thinking, oh, this is going to be too dangerous, it's important to take a step back and realize you're actually not the one who made that decision. It's just the voice that came up from resistance. And the more that we can step away from our thoughts as our own thinking, the more we can be a little bit more, let's just say, rational with our choices and what we end up ultimately deciding not to do. So in this case, we might get a voice that's saying it's too dangerous or it'll take too much work. And then we can ask ourselves, is that really my voice or is that the voice of my resistance? And if we can wholeheartedly say, oh, yeah, it's a voice of my resistance, we can ask ourselves, well, where is that voice coming from? Why is it saying those things? And is it true? And the more we kind of go into analyzing that voice, the more we can get a more accurate picture of if something is truly difficult or not. And this is really important because a lot of times, when we listen to personal development, they're just kind of saying, go do this, you can do anything you want, you have unlimited potential. Yes, that's true, but there are some things that are truly difficult and dangerous, especially if we don't have experience. And so it helps to make sure we're not just saying, oh, this is just the voice of my resistance and I'm just going to do whatever I want, but to actually to really analyze his voice to see how accurate it is because oftentimes it's likely not accurate, and if it's not, then it's much easier to do the thing. I hope that made sense.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to think. So what would you say is the best way for someone to use your system for their own personal growth?
Yeah. So there's three parts to internal resistance. First, we got to look at the wants. Then we look at the resistance, and then we look at the tricks of resistance. So I'll go into it a little bit more. I kind of talked about how our own wants can create challenges to achieving them. I talked about one aspect of that, which is an overactive want. But there's actually a lot more challenges our wanting mechanism creates. There are strong wants, immediate wants, high wants, specific wants, conflicting wants. So we first look at the wants first and see how it is the very thing that is holding us back. Once we can narrow in on a very clear want that we do desire to move forward with, then we look at the resistance. Now, as I mentioned, anytime a desire stands before us, it gets evaluated by resistance or this part of the brain using a whole host of criteria. And in my work, I found there's about 25 to 30 criteria the brain evaluates or goes through. And they can include like some of the things that we talked about, but they go even deeper into things like family systems, inner child, authority issues, um, the defense mechanism, how painful a person is to mistakes, and the list goes on. So it's not one fit all or cookie cutter solution because we have to look at what's holding us back and work within it. And the challenge with that is that what help what helps to go to get through one resistance may not work with another resistance, and it can actually be counterintuitive. This is why when people try to do something or they're told, hey, do this because it worked for me. And the reason it doesn't work for them is because their resistance might be something different, or they might actually have multiple resistance. So, this is something that comes up a lot. A person will be stuck and they go out, get coaching, go to a seminar, they learn something that helps them get through it. Because they were able to get through it, they think it'll work for the other person. And the other person might have the same issue, but they might have 2 or 3 other issues as well. So once they work through the issue that the person told them about, they still won't get results because there's other issues underneath. And I'm not one to try to sell snake oil like that resistance is easy to get over. It's a pretty deep topic, and some of the reasons for resistance took me decades of learning about the topic to even learn about. And so I didn't even know there were issues that were holding me back. And it's not something I could have just come up on my own. They weren't obvious or common sense. It took learning from people who were dedicated in this field to understand these different facets. And I suspect there's a lot more reasons for resistance that I've even come across, as the human brain is pretty complex.
Well, yeah, I think the human brain is really complex.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
it still tricks us every day. But so where does our resistance come from? I mean, does it come from when we are children and our beliefs that we grew up with?
Yeah, so beliefs are just one part of the equation. So as I mentioned, anytime a desire stands before it, it gets evaluated by the brain using a whole host of criteria. And one of the criteria is beliefs or limiting beliefs. So if we have beliefs that something is not possible or that it's not possible for us, the brain is going to make it difficult to go ahead and do it. Though there's more things than just beliefs because right now in traditional personal development, the word beliefs gets talked about a lot and people think it's just about beliefs, but I want people to understand that it's much more than that. So you can work on improving your beliefs, but other things can come up as well. Like I said, family systems, authority issues, and things of that nature. And so, where does resistance actually develop? Well, it develops as we're growing up. It develops from the encouragement or lack of encouragement that we receive. It comes from the traumatic experiences we've had. So if we grew up with a lot of bullying and people made fun of us, those things seep into us and start to create the walls in our lives. They do form the beliefs in our comfort zones, and our brain starts to think there's only a certain thing that we can be good at, or a lot of times, uh, almost nothing. But a lot of it is also just, I don't want to use the word genetics, but what we're built for. We humans and animals are complex. So we come into this world already with a set of mechanisms that is designed to protect us and keep us safe. So some of them are naturally just part of how we come into the world. But what's really important to understand is that even though someone may not have had as challenging of a life or an upbringing as another person, doesn't mean that they still don't have resistance because the mind tends to default to the negative. So if we were growing up and although our life was, fairly good, if we didn't receive a lot of encouragement that said that we can do different things, then the brain naturally defaults to that we can't or it's going to be hard. So sometimes resistance forms not from because bad things happen and not because we're innately born with it, but because we just didn't receive the positive encouragement the brain seeks to know that there are certain things that we could do and really be good at.
Yeah, that's cool. So, first of all, I need to extend a hello to a few people here in the comments.
Great.
And we have Adam, who is watching us from the UK. We have Robert, that is watching us from somewhere in Canada. I
Yeah.
forget where exactly. We have Yana, who is watching us, and Ben Bruce, who are together, and they are watching us from the Seychelles in the Indian Ocean. And then we have Amy Hickey, who's watching us from Ohio. We have Jeremy Jones watching us from Ohio. Damon Huber, who's watching us from Ohio. And my dad, who's watching us from across the street in
Yeah.
Ohio. So we actually have a question here from Ben
Sure.
Bird. He says, how can we indicate these resistance measures? I don't really understand the question, but
Yeah. I'm gonna assume what the question's asking. I think it's asking likely two things. One is how can we identify these resistance in us? And again, the human brain is pretty complex and it's not
yeah,
really easy. It takes working with someone who has a lot of understanding with this to really understand what's going on. But there is a simple method that I have found that really works that people can do on their own, and it's called self talk. I think a lot of us have already heard about what self talk is, but there's a way to use it to help us identify what's going on internally for us that's holding us back. So, self talk are statements that we say or repeat to ourselves of the changes that we want to have or have happen. For example, if I want to improve my concentration, I might say things like, I have an excellent concentration. I easily focus on anything I choose. And in the beginning, when we repeat these statements, it doesn't feel good. It feels awkward and it feels uncomfortable. And as we say it, the mind starts retorting, saying things like, no, you don't. You have a terrible concentration. And it'll trigger memories of moments where we didn't focus well. And it'll say other stuff. And all of those things that the mind responds with are signs of our resistance. That's what's going on internally, that it's keeping us from having good focus. It might say things like, you watch too much television or things like that. And then we start to understand, oh, wow, this is what's creating the challenges in my life. Now, this is just one example, but we can use it on many levels. If a person wants to become more assertive, they could say, I'm a confident, assertive communicator. I communicate my needs and wants effectively. And as they say that, their mind might retort with other comments like, no, you're not, or you're weak and you don't know how to talk and you stutter and things like that. Well, now we're getting ideas for why it might be difficult to assert ourselves. So, this is a one easy, simple way where we can identify what our resistance is. More or less, create a statement of an outcome that you want and repeat it over and over, and just listen to what your mind says. All of that is a sign of what's going on for us internally. Now, I said I made an assumption of what the question was saying, but I'm
yes.
also going to assume that he's probably asking, how do we get over our resistance? And again, it goes back to what I said earlier. We got to first figure out what our resistance is and work on the cause of that resistance, because there is no one cookie cutter solution. And if there was, I would be a billionaire. But but there is one solution that actually, it's still extremely useful for regardless of what someone's resistance is, and it also comes back to the self-talk. So like I said, self-talk is comfortable, it's uncomfortable in the beginning, and it makes it feel like it's not true, we're lying to ourselves, and it gives us a lot of data. But then if we continue repeating that self-talk, eventually that uncomfortableness goes away. where we could say it with neutral feelings. And if we continue repeating it, those new words start going into our unconscious and start rewiring our brain to act out what the words describe. So if we continue repeating, I have an excellent concentration, or I'm a calm, confident communicator, over time we actually start to become that. And we don't have to do all this work and difficulty in learning a new skill and applying it and doing it wrong until we get it right. Just by repeating a statement, we can actually start producing the results just from that simple thing. And the reason I like to talk about self talk is because when we're dealing with resistance, it really helps to do little things that get big results, little actions that have maximum outcomes. And that's because when we have resistance, it's actually hard to do a lot of stuff. And so if we can focus on the little things that are giving the biggest weight in terms of our change, then we can actually push through resistance much more easily. And I personally believe self talk is the simplest thing a person can do. All it requires is talking. That's it. Like you don't even have to, get up off the couch or turn off the television or any of that. You just have to speak. And as long as you can get started with that, then the next steps that are necessary will be easier to do. And when we can do the next steps, we can do the ones after that. But it really helps to start with the little ones. And I like starting with this. And we can really dive really deep into the whole resistance conversation and talking about other things that can help. But if a person can focus on this first, it makes everything else easier.
Yeah. Wow. I I'm telling you that people in the comments are learning so much, and they say they could listen to you all night, and they're really bragging about you, and especially the whole suit and tie thing. That to them, that's something that earns their respect. So I thank you so much for showing up for the show tonight and showing up with a purpose and knowing what you were going to do. But I know personally that people out there want to learn more about you,
Yeah.
want to know more about the way you go about things. So, do you happen to have any contact information you would like to give out?
Sure. So if anybody wants to get any of my books, they can go to camknight.com. You'll see it right on my screen, KAMKNIGHT.com. And then I have a course called Conquer Internal Resistance to Achieve Your Next Goal. And you can learn more about it on my website as well. Now, the way I was able to get such deep information around a topic that's not really being discussed is because I figured out a way to disengage the barrier between our conscious and unconscious mind. So, what I help clients do is I take them into their unconscious mind and we do the work at the unconscious level. We see what their exact resistance are and we release it at the unconscious level, which creates much faster change than any other way possible. We can spend months and years doing traditional coaching and therapy and all of that. But with this method, we can go really direct to the source and it can take just a few sessions to a few weeks. So if anyone's interested in doing any one-on-one work with me, they can reach me at mentor@camknight.com. So that's just mentor at camknight.com.
That is awesome. So I know that you were talking about books there, and I know this show has gone over, and I'm sorry for that, but I'm listening and learning here. So
Yeah, I can continue talking if you'd like.
how, what are the books about, and how can, well, you already told us how we can get them, but
Yeah.
what are the books about? What are they called?
So a lot of my books are in the area of mental performance. So I have a book on speed reading, on memory, on concentration, as well as mind mapping. And then I have other books kind of related in the topics that we're talking about. And I was an author prior to talking about internal resistance. In fact, it took me after writing my 10th book that I actually
Ten?
started 10th. Yeah,
Wow.
that I actually started developing the concept of internal resistance or coming to the concept. And then that's what I've been kind of doing for the last 5 years. So the books are more in the area of mental performance, which is still extremely helpful for what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because in my experience, we need to learn what to do first. Then we need to be able to get ourselves to do it. And then we need to be able to stick to that. And the books that I just mentioned will help us not only learn, but be more active and proactive.
That's awesome. So again, you guys can get all the books on camknight.com, which is KAMKNIGHT.com. All right. And I need everybody out there, including you, Cam, to do me a favor this
Sure.
week, next week, and for the rest of your life. I need you guys to make every second count. Why? Because you never know when those seconds will run out on your one life. Thank you guys so much. Thank you again, Cam. I'll see everybody back here next Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And until then, have a fantastic week. Thanks, Cam.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me. This was great.